Hola. Hola. Hello, Chris.
Hello, hello. How are you doing? Looks like you're in an even nicer location than I am.
Yes, this is our farm in Costa Rica, and this is a coconut
Beautiful.
tree. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Nice, nice.
Yes. Thank you for joining me.
Of
Mm,
course. Excited for it. This will be fun.
okay. I hope so. So I decided to learn to make raw vegan wraps, and for this
Nice.
reason, I started to um, do research, and I found your video about the Better Than Nori sheet, what I tried yesterday,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it worked well. It was a little bit
Awesome, awesome.
thinner than it should be,
Yeah.
but it worked well, and I could fold my wrap in it, and we could enjoy it. And it was a little bit more green that I usually make, but I really enjoyed the greenness of the sheet. I thought maybe I would just ask a few questions about how to make raw vegan wraps or how to make raw vegan recipes. And I'm very happy that you joined me today. So thank you very much.
Such a
Okay.
pleasure and absolutely honored that you found my recipe and wanted to try it out.
Yes.
I really like that recipe as well, and I usually use it for sushi, but it works great as a wrap. And with all those greens, it's definitely a nutritional powerhouse. And it's really fun too, because actually I invented that while I was out in Costa Rica when there was a
Yeah.
whole bunch of those different kind of types of greens and some wild greens and stuff like that. So it's a fun one.
I could almost put the same greens there because I'm in Costa Rica and I could almost get all of them. So
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. When people are away from Costa Rica and they maybe don't have the different types of spinach and maybe abundance of purslane and stuff like that, I usually recommend they just use regular spinach and arugula and maybe even a little bit of purple cabbage to give it a little bit of that purple
Uh-huh.
color, which is typical in nori sheets and stuff like that. So
Yes.
it's versatile, but it's fun when you can get that purslane and some of those other different kind
Yes.
of greens.
I put leaves of beetroot to have this
Nice.
color.
Yeah, and
Yes.
extra saltiness too then.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you like raw vegan wraps?
I actually really, really like wraps. And whenever I have them, I always think like, why don't I make these more often, to be honest? And I think really the big reason is, and this shocks some people, but I'm a pretty lazy chef. And I have certain recipes that I really just make for special occasions, for retreats or parties or stuff like that. And then I have more simple stuff that I usually make for myself more often. So I've actually only made wraps once this year so far. It's 8 months in, and I've only made pizzas. I'm well known for pizzas. I've only made those 2 times this year so far. A lot of the rest of the time, I just make noodles or salads or sometimes stews or chilies and stuff like that. I'm playing with falafel balls right now because I'm going to be chefing at a retreat out here, and we're going to have falafels on the first night.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the reason there. I'm a little bit lazy with the stuff that you have to think, 10, 12, sometimes 24 hours ahead of time. But every time I
Yes.
make it, I'm really stoked, and it's super, super delicious and fun.
Yes. So you made a wrap once this year, and what was it?
My friend Lissa from Raw Food Romance, she made an entire wraps book that's called Hand Salads. And I actually
Yes.
made one of her wraps because I wanted to try her recipes and the way she makes her wraps out. And it was really delicious. It was called Honey, I Love Mustard Wrap.
Hmm.
And it was a really thick, kind of bread-like wrap, which I can go a little bit more into. And I filled it with kind of like almost like a coleslaw, but it was like a rainbow coleslaw with a whole bunch of different types of cabbage and a really nice creamy dressing that kind of coated everything, carrots, and just wrapped it all up. And it was really big and thick, and it was super, super
Yes.
delicious.
I learned the folding technique from her, and I do the same because
Yes,
I love to hold a big piece of food. So yes, and
absolutely. And not have it fall out, not have it actually
yes,
like fall right out of the bottom of the wrap.
yes,
And I guess I could say like I'm a little bit fibbing when I say I've only had wraps once this year because a lot of the times, and this kind of goes back to my laziness, and this was after I developed that better than nori kind of sushi nori like wrap. I've found a source of raw vegan certified organic nori that's like certified all those things and really tasty. So a
uh-huh.
lot of times actually I just use nori sheets And whenever I make a curry or a salad, I'll just wrap them in that and eat them as that. But I mean, it is kind of wraps, but they're not wraps that I personally made. And I've definitely
Yes.
eaten those a heck of a lot. I probably went through like 200 sheets this year. So yeah,
Okay.
so I have those fairly often because it is really fun to put your salad into a wrap and just eat it up that way.
Yes. Also, you can, I mean, I do it a lot of times to just put in lettuce, leaf of lettuce, and I
Yeah.
just put my salad in it. And but to make a nice dehydrated sheet and fold it nicely, that's a different experience. So that's
Yeah,
what
it
I
is.
want
And
to, yes,
it's more calories too, so it's more satiating and
yes.
it has more of an authentic kind of wrap experience, right? So it's just a totally different thing than just a lettuce wrap, which is still good. I like those too, and romaine
Yes.
leaves or collard green leaves, those work really, really well as well.
Uh-huh.
And
They
sometimes, go ahead.
they are strong enough, I imagine.
Oh yeah, especially the
Yes.
collard green leaves.
Yes.
And sometimes when I make wraps, I actually still put down like a collard green leaf or a romaine leaf on the inside, and then I fill with the wetter ingredients and ingredients that might have some sauce on it inside that lettuce leaf. Because then what happens is when you wrap it, it doesn't sog out the wrap, and you can actually have it last a lot longer.
Yeah. Thank you.
Such
Okay.
a pleasure. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I started to make recipes, and I have a lot of things that are not sheets at the end, just pieces of
Yeah,
things or
they
too
can
thin or
split or
something like. Yes, and I wanted to ask you about this process.
I'll start with wraps just because they are fairly
Okay.
difficult and a lot of people experience that, they might break too easily or like you said, be too thin, or even when you're drying them and they form cracks in them and stuff like that. And I've had many wraps that have done that before. And, it depending on what type of wrap it is, like oftentimes a very simple wrap that I like to do, which is perfect for you out in Costa Rica, is I mix either papaya and tomato or mango and tomato
Mm-hmm.
and have that as the base of the wrap, and then just put a little bit of chia and psyllium. And that makes a really, really nice, simple, kind of sweet and tangy wrap.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when I'm drying it, all of a sudden a crack will form and I'll be like, what the heck? How'd that happen? And when that happens, what I do is I just blend up a little bit of extra mango and just patch it with a little bit of extra
Mm-hmm.
mango, and then it works really, really well.
Uh-huh.
And those are quite pliable and pretty easy. And if you're able to get mangoes and papayas, which of course you are, then that's an easy, pretty inexpensive, quick go-to wrap. Now, with other recipes, I'd honestly actually say I've always been a little bit chef minded. When I moved out at 17, I kind of became the cook for my friends and for myself. And so I always kind of felt a little bit of a natural inclination to just making stuff in the kitchen. And my first 5 years with raw food, I did a lot of experimenting, but it was really, really simple foods. Like I wasn't trying to recreate like gourmet foods. It was more so just making fun, simple 1 to 5 ingredient raw food meals.
Yes.
And getting that as a base and really understanding flavor pairing and knowing how much sweet and sour and bitter to add to things to get a really poppy flavor helped me get a really good backbone for creating more kind of nostalgic, fancier, low fat raw gourmet recipes. So where I am now, most of the time, like if someone says like, hey, can you make this? Like I'll think about it. I'll look at some classic regular recipes of it that are cooked, and then I'll be able to know like, okay, well, I could make a similar version of this just by swapping these ingredients out for raw ones and maybe adding this to thicken it or to thin it, depending upon what I want to do. Add this ingredient to make it more salty if I want. If it has a lot of salt or say fish sauce in it, then I know things to switch it with. And for the most part now, I feel like, within 1 or 2 tries, I'm pretty happy with it. And by that second try, I know like the final little tweaks to just make it pop
Mm-hmm.
just that little bit more.
Yes.
So that takes some time, but I even have a book there called Naturally Raw Sauces, which really goes into all of my techniques and my 10 big tips for making sauces.
Mm-hmm.
And that carries over to almost anything because, it talks about thickeners and it talks about flavor pairing and it talks about a whole bunch of things that really make the process a lot easier, which with time kind of becomes automatic. But in the beginning, it's kind of a juggle to learn that if you're not really inclined to be in the kitchen or if you haven't done it a whole bunch.
I just tried, I had this idea to make papaya and pepper to make a wrap with it, but actually it turned out to be a great sauce.
That's fun. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes the mistakes end up being new creations and different things that you never thought about, and so that I think that's a big part of the process too. I know some people, some of their favorite recipes, they were completely an accident, like they're trying to make something different. So that's that's lots of fun.
Yes. But there is one other thing that I experienced that if I make a recipe and I just taste it, that's one thing. But if I have to eat the whole thing,
Mm.
that maybe it's a different experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are some recipes too that I've made that, like, the first 10 bites, I'm like, wow, this is the most amazing thing ever. And if I have a whole meal of it by the end, I'm like, whoa, this is too much. Like, this is either too much flavor, or it's a little
Yes.
bit too fatty, or the flavor just becomes overwhelming. So I think most people are used to having multiple recipes per meal, but when you get into raw food, often it's a one pot meal where you just have one thing, right? And
Yes.
so it's always a bit of a balance, and I make some recipes that I do purposely make in smaller quantities to accompany other recipes, because otherwise as one dish it'd just
Mhm.
be way too much. But that's usually, again, kind of more for like celebrations or gatherings, or if I'm making food for people that don't always eat raw food and they want it to mimic old favorites and kind of more classical meals with multiple foods and stuff like that. But for the most part, I do really like to have the one pot meal, maybe have a fruit starter, and then have like a big pot of whatever it is, chili or curry or salad or anything like that. And it is kind of a balance, making it so that it's not overwhelming or underwhelming if you eat like a
Mhm.
kilo or two of it.
Yes. Yes. So, do you try other raw vegan recipes?
Yeah, yeah, of course, but admittedly not a lot. Like I said, I've always kind of been inclined to be in the kitchen, and I like to play and make my own recipes. And by this time now, I've made so many variations of so many different things, that I generally just throw stuff together with what I have based on kind of, preconceived old recipes that I have. I help head up a raw vegan bundle once a year. And with that, there's a lot of people that are a part and lots of recipe books. So I do, of course, also try some of their recipes. For the most part, though, like I find that I just make what's available, and it's loosely based off of old recipes that I've created. And occasionally I make a recipe right from my book, like exactly, but most of the time it's just kind of throwing stuff together and playing with it. But
Yes.
I think this year I've made at least like, actually, I've probably made about like 10 other people's recipes this year, something like that. And it's lots of fun because, like, sometimes you get stuck into your own flavors. Like a lot of people kind of have their own flavor pairing and preferred spices and preferred amount of, say, lemon that they use in the recipes, and you get used to it and you enjoy it. But then when you try someone else's recipe and they use a different mix of spices, or they use more lemon, or they just have a completely different idea, different ingredients that you never thought of, it can broaden your repertoire and your horizons. And it just, sometimes that can pop. Like, as a chef, I mostly eat my own food, and it's pretty rare that other people make me food. But it's really a treat when somebody else makes me one of their recipes, or when I do try one of their recipes, and I'm really, really excited and happy about it, because uh, eating good food and something you're not used to is pretty amazing.
Yes. So, do you like when someone makes food for you? Do you like that feeling, or?
Yeah, it's a treat. I,
Yes.
I absolutely
Yes.
love it. Yeah, like I rarely go to raw restaurants, but when I do on occasion, usually I'm pretty dang happy. And when other people make recipes for me or food for me, I just kind of feel like, wow, this is a treat. This is great. Like I didn't have to lift a finger. Maybe I'll just do the dishes instead of doing the dishes and making the food.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay. What kind of fillings do you like in the wrap?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, often it's just a salad, like any kind of salad that I really enjoy. But when I'm making wraps, I do like to have a whole bunch of different flavors and colors. So inside wraps, sometimes I have more ingredients than my typical salad. Like my salad might only have 3 to 5 ingredients in it. But a wrap, I do like to make kind of the rainbow wrap, where I have all the different colors and different shreds, and some wetter ingredients and some drier ingredients. But often it's going to look like at least one or two different types of leafy greens. I really like to add arugula to that, to add a little bit of spiciness kind of to it. I usually like to have tomatoes. Sometimes I have carrot shreds. Sometimes I have either beet shreds or cabbage shreds. I like to utilize different textures. So sometimes I freeze some of the ingredients. I might freeze some shredded cabbage and then it gets softer and tastes like cooked cabbage. Often I'll dehydrate mushrooms and throw them in there. Sometimes I like to make a sauce and put it inside the wrap, or have avocados. I mean, avocados in a wrap are pretty dang amazing,
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that's usually kind of the way I do it. Sometimes I put peppers and stuff like that in there as well. But usually it's basically like a giant salad, but just in its own layers, so that when you cut the wrap, you see each layer rather than it just being a mix.
Yeah, so it's crunchy and also creamy and
yeah.
Yes.
Some savoriness, sometimes some sweetness. Like I might even like to put some sliced mangoes in there sometimes, or stuff like that. But it depends also on the wrap. If the wrap is already sweet, or if I have a dipping sauce on the side that's already sweet, well, it might just be savory fillings inside the wrap. And I usually like to have the creamy and the watery ingredients right in the middle of the wrap, so it doesn't, water down the wrap on the outside. So I might, have my wrap and then put all the wet or the drier kind of lettuces, maybe some sprouts. Sometimes I like to put alfalfa or different types of sprouts in there. And then once that's a firm base, then I'll put a strip of tomatoes and maybe some cucumber or, peppers or all that kind of stuff, avocado, and then wrap it up. So that's right in the center.
Yes.
I can simplify my wrap making process by saying, like, I usually use, like I said, I like to have like a fruit and tomato or a fruit and zucchini. I mean, they're both technically fruits, but I'll use about 0.75 kilograms of a mix of those two. And I usually find that I want about half of it to be the mango or the papaya, because that gives a lot of pliability and it helps to stick together. And then I usually add about a tablespoon of either chia, flax, psyllium, or buckwheat groats, like raw buckwheat groats. And I'll do a tablespoon of 2 tablespoons rather of any of those 4. So, sometimes it's 2 tablespoons of chia, or it might be a tablespoon of chia and a tablespoon of psyllium, and I blend that up and then I put it on one of these kind of dehydrator sheets, just like this, and form it into a circle. And once it's totally dry, I'll flip it and, just dry it a little bit more so it's tacky on the one side, but not totally dry and starts curling up. So that's usually what I do. I know with Lissa's, she uses this kind of a silicone tray that actually has the edges.
Yes,
and
I have them.
Yeah, and so when making these, you generally need to make a little bit more volume because it's going all the way out to the sides and you want it a little bit thicker. So with that, I would usually use about 1 kilo to 1.2 kilos of a mix of any ingredients. Like I've made them with like tomatoes and carrots and mango and zucchini and all that kind of stuff. And then maybe put about 2 tablespoons of any of those 4. So two tablespoons of 2 of any of those 4. So it ends up being 4 tablespoons because it's a thicker, more pliable wrap. But the big thing with these wraps too is that you don't peel it. You just dry it until it's totally dry and on the top, and then you just peel it off and then it's ready. And that was one of the big discoveries that Lissa made, which was actually an accident. She just forgot the wraps in the dehydrator and then thought they were garbage. But then when she actually took them off the sheet, they're perfect. So
yes. Okay.
One of those happy accidents. And the one last thing I'll say though, because like I mentioned, like, in between 1 to 1.2-ish kilos, even a little higher, the more watery ingredients you use, the more you're gonna actually need to more volume you'll need, right? Because the water is gonna evaporate away. But when you use more dense ingredients, it can be a little bit less so, and I usually don't use water and I just make it a bit thicker, which makes it a little bit harder to spread, but that's up to personal preference. It'll just impact the drying time. And I like to have at least, like I said, that 1 kilo of actual food ingredients. And if you add a bit of water to that, you can do that to make it easier to pour and spread.
I also find that if the mixture is thicker, then it won't crack as easily because not as much water is going out from the mixture.
As long as you have enough of the kind of more firm ingredients, then it doesn't matter as much. But if you don't have enough ingredients and you're adding water to make more volume because you're lacking the volume in the more dense ingredients, then it's going to crack. But if you have like a kilo of, of vegetables and greens and fruits and stuff, and some psyllium and chia or whatever, chia and flax. You can add some water to it just to make more volume and make it pour easier, but it's less likely to crack then, because a kilo of ingredients to hydrate it down is a lot of fiber, especially if it's like ingredients that have fiber in them. If it's not watermelon, for example.
Yes. Okay, I had two questions at the end of the interview, and they are totally different topic, so it will be a jumping out from our conversation. But I wanted to ask you, can you imagine yourself to living in a fruit forest surrounded with fruit trees and take care of your own fruit trees? So can you imagine your life like that?
Absolutely. I've probably spent about almost 4 years of my life in that kind of a situation, but just months at a time, because for over 10 years, I spent between 2 to 3 months a time in Costa Rica, mostly at the Farm of Life. And, it's a permaculture farm with tons and tons of fruit. So there's a growing fruit forest there. And part of that time I lived in my hammock tent, just in the yoga hut, like living in there and swimming in the stream and using the shower sometimes and stuff like that. So there is definitely some appeal there. But skateboarding is my first love. So I actually am a city boy, and I prefer to live in the city and take trips to the tropics rather than live in the tropics or in a fruit farm and take trips for skateboarding. As I get older, that may change. I often say that I'll probably retire on my surfboard. Might find myself in a fruit forest, because I have always thought of getting some land and having my own retreat center. I even have a thing set up called the TRA Dream, which is basically that. It's a nonprofit charity to create a healing retreat center. Ideally, it'd be somewhere in the tropics where I could grow my own fruit forest. But so yeah, it's not present, but it is something that has been on my mind. And at different points in my raw food journey, I have felt more pull to it, and at different parts, I felt a little less pull to it.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes,
but I really do like it. It's one of those things that has an abundance of benefits. Like having amazing quality food, and learning that growing cycle and being a part of it, and being in perfect temperatures a lot of the year where you don't even have to wear too much clothing.
yes.
And just the cleanest air, and having nature around you all the time. Like there's obviously appeal to that, and it's amazing. But then there's also the for skateboarding, the lack of ability to skateboard, or different types of places to skateboard, unless you build your own kind of place, which maybe I will do that as well someday. And it is a bunch of work, like as I'm sure you've experienced, like having your own homestead and planting and farming and stuff. It's a full-time job, and
It is.
so it is really full-time job. So because I juggle a lot of balls, between my own work and skateboarding, and I like to live semi-retired, like I'd rather be part-time for the rest of my life than like work really hard for 10 years
Mhm.
and then retire, so because I'm juggling all those balls and really enjoy my free time right now, city living is for me.
I understand. Then my last question, I would like to finish this interview with this one. What is your favorite fruit? And please just
It
choose
is
one.
tough. Yeah, I know you said to
Yes.
choose one.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll start first by saying usually what I say is it's just whatever's in season and in my hand, like top quality in my hand.
Yes.
Because yeah, I know that's a common answer, but
I totally agree, but
yeah.
still.
But if I only, it's really tough. Okay, I'll just say this one thing first before I decide.
Okay.
By saying this, does this mean like that is the only fruit you get to eat, or is it just
No.
saying your favorite fruit?
Just
No, okay, yeah, because
what is the fruit that moves something in you?
And the reason I said that, because some people say, like, if you could only have one fruit, what would that fruit be? And it would be a different answer than my favorite fruit.
Absolutely. Totally. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe it could be like mangoes or bananas.
We may have the same answer. I don't know. A lot of people would, but I would say if I really had to just say my favorite that makes me like, when I'm eating it, I'm dancing and my head's just like, oh my God, like, especially when it's good, like, and that's important, is durian. When it's top-notch durian, there's probably nothing else in this world. But again, I wouldn't even want to eat it every day. Like, to me, durian's
Yes.
too much for me for every single day. But yeah, durian is freaking magic. And when it's good, like, is tough to beat really good durian. You know, like I'd say cherimoya gives it a run for its money. And if it was kind of going into that, like if you could eat it all year round, I'd maybe pick cherimoya
Yes.
over durian.
I agree.
But durian is just phenomenal. How about
Yes.
you?
Absolutely. That is our whole project about durian, because
Yeah.
I want tree ripen fresh durian in abundance, and we have amazing variety planted here, grafted varieties like Musang King and Teka and Blackthorn and Iowa, Chani. So we really work on this project to bring durian culture here to Costa Rica, and to show people how a fresh tree ripened durian is a totally different experience than any other thing. And
Absolutely.
like with Zoli, we are just grabbed out from our ordinary life a long time ago by durian. And we are just after how can we create a durian heaven for ourselves and for others and our family. So yes, I agree. And I cannot eat durian every day. The same here.
Yeah.
So yes, but
I mean,
durian just
if I
moves
was
me.
forced to, like if I was living out there and they were dropping every day and it's like, well, I got to eat durian, like I would make that sacrifice and I would eat durian every day, but I wouldn't feel quite as light and bouncy as I do when I have, you know, more vibrant or not vibrant, but more kind of juicy fruits, lower fat fruits as the mainstay. But I have eaten durian every day when I was in the tropics in some environments, you know, when I was in Bali, for example. But yeah, it sounds like Costa Rica is slowly becoming Thailand 2.0, you know, and I know a lot of people who have a
Or
similar
maybe
dream and
Malaysia, because I prefer Malay durian over Thai durian. Yes.
Yeah. There's so many amazing varieties. You have a good mix of them. Those are definitely tasty ones.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay,
Well,
thank
sounds
you.
like I got to come there. I got to come there at least in 10 years when those are dropping, and
No,
hopefully
I
before
hope
then.
2 to 3 years. We have big trees, like 4 meters high. They are like the trunks are like thick like this.
Oh,
so
they're a few years old
think
already.
they are, we planted big trees, and they are planted 2 years ago, and they are very healthy and strong and growing, and we plant in a syntropic permaculture system, and they are just they are very strong. Okay, Chris, thank you for the interview. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for the durian answer.
My pleasure. Absolutely. I couldn't go anywhere else. You know, that's if I'm forced with one, it's got to be durian. The king. Hail the king.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Absolutely. And yeah, hope to see you in 3D sometime.